Hey, welcome to Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout and to our show, The Issues and Challenges in Today's Fire Service. I'm Chief Rick Lasky, again, along with my co-host and very good friend, Chief Terry McGrath from Lewisville, Texas. And we've got another great one for you today. We've got some great guests, and we've got a great topic, one that we need to really talk about. As always, Terry and I always try to mention to you that, if you have any questions, please feel free to fire them off to us on Twitter. We'll do our best as we can to get to them. We usually try to get to most of them if we can. Some of them might be along the same. If we don't get to it, it might be because someone else posted the same question. But make sure you add hashtag FE Talk for fire engineering. So hashtag FE Talk. All right. And today we're hanging out with some good friends and people that I even told them that they get it and they truly love the job. Our topic today is back to the basics again. We'll talk about that in a second. Joining us today is Deputy Chief Anthony Avillo. Anthony recently retired from North Hudson, New Jersey Regional Fire and Rescue. He's teaching full-time, whether he's on the road or at the Fire Academy, the college, among other things. Great books. If you don't have his books or any of the stuff he's done, you're missing out. Anthony's incredible. We've got Chief Kenny Gabriel, my very good friend from Coeur, Idaho. Kenny and I worked together when we were there, and he's been doing an incredible job with the group there in Coeur. If you want to see how to run a fire department, how to make it all work, you need to go see Kenny's shop. We've got Jimmy Plieth. Jimmy's a senior firefighter with almost, I think, like a month short of 22 years with Detroit, Michigan. Jimmy's I don't even say I don't think passionate is a good word when it comes to cancer awareness for firefighters. He's a champion behind that effort, and maybe he can share some thoughts on that throughout today's show too as well. We've got Captain Gary Apple. If you sat through one of my classes, if you sit through Pride and Ownership, you see his picture every time. When we talk about once a firefighter, always a firefighter, it's Gary's picture from way back when he was a firefighter. Gary gets it. Gary's a great officer. He's a great firefighter. He was an incredible chief's aide for the battalions. Great when he was on the truck company. I will say this. We told the story about Daryl Brown, Gary, when he was on the show. When Tim and I told Daryl he was being promoted to battalion chief, and he collapsed in Tim's arms, literally. I remember one of our favorites, Captain Butch Flanagan, who I adore. You know where I'm going with this, Gary. I asked Butch. Butch came in and told me, guys, he's like, all right, it's time. It's time. I got to go. And Gary was sitting on the list, number one. And, like anybody, when you sit in that list, you're always wondering, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? So I asked Butch to call Gary on his cell phone and tell him. And he told him, and I think it was like 5 minutes later, he's standing in our doorway. He's full of grass clippings. He's sweating. He's going, are you guys, I can't say the curse word, but it starts with the S word. But are you serious? And we're like, yeah. And it was the emotion. People who love this job get emotional like that. I guess that's where I'm going with it. And I'm just honored to have all you guys here today. Terry is as well. And Terry, I appreciate. I know you're out with the kids, and I was almost thinking you weren't going to make it, so we got you back today, partner. So, but that's it, guys. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thanks, Chief.
Well, and this group, especially when it comes to our topic, back to the basics. I was mentioning this while we were off air for our listeners, our viewers. I was receiving recognition, Innovative of the Year for creating a Saving Our Own program, and I got to do a little talk at FDIC. And before me, the feature speaker was retired Commissioner Leo Stapleton from the Boston Fire Department. He's written a ton of books, great books. Anthony was talking about. He said it right. They're great books. But he got out on the stage and in front of everybody. He walked up to the podium. And he's an incredible individual, incredible man. I think he's in his 90s now. I always tell people when I grew up, I want to be just like him. But he walked out to the podium and he said, I see that this year's theme is back to the basics. He goes, back to the basics. why did we leave him in the first time? Actually, we kind of suck at him. And he put one slide up on the screen with about 12 bullet points, and he went on his whole talk, all the things we suck at, like, you know, search and rescue, ventilation. His whole point was and I said it before to the guys, we're so far down the road with jumping out of helicopters and carabiners and things like that, that it's frustrating to watch YouTube tapes. Anthony, you use a lot of videos in your classes and your tactical classes. Tell me about sometimes the frustration. You know, you see an engine pull up, you're like, it is not that hard to stretch a line, call for water, the driver to give you tank water, pump it, knock it, do something. I mean, it's got to be frustrating, especially with what you do.
Well, it is, you know, you look at some of these videos and you know what, you can Monday morning quarterback anything, and you can, but there are some real obvious ones out there. And you know, I try to keep it more positive in my classes, but sometimes you got to show what not to do in order to show what to do, you know. And you're right, Rick, it's those basic things that, you know, we sort of fail to, you know, like getting first water on the fire. You know, you have 4 companies in place, all 4 are stretching a line, and the line never gets to the fire, you know. So like some of these just very basic things are areas that we really need to revisit, because unfortunately, as you said, we think we're better at them than we are. And you know, one of the greatest books is Vinnie Dunn's Safety and Survival. And if you look at that book and all those chapters on, you know, they're all very basic things. When I first read it, I was like, wow, I know all these things. But then I realized, well, Vinnie Dunn's a genius. So just like Leo Stapleton, we can't get past those things. If you look at the line of duty deaths, these are the activities that we're getting people killed in, and they're firefighter 1 things. You know, so I think, you know, we really have to take a hard look at especially the coordination of our firefighter 1 activities.
Well, and exactly. We've said for years, I know it's been brought up at FDIC a lot, you know, when do you think we'll ever get everybody trained to the same standard? And I said, you know, as much as I'd love to see it, I don't, you know, with different academies, different instructors, different things, I don't think we'll ever get quite there. But come on, I mean, we're, you know, and I've said, we're talking about stretching hose. We're talking about getting out and doing it. Terry, you and I have talked about this a ton of times about, you know, how many times you see the guys out with the aerial ladders, spinning the ladders around the saws, versus how many times you see the guys stretching hose, Terry, and getting out there and kind of kicking it when it comes to the basics.
Well, and it's, you know, I think you made that interesting point earlier about we get so far ahead of ourselves because we gravitate towards the new and the sexy and so the, you know, the idea of the technical rescue and all the bells and whistles that we want to come up with. And I laugh sometimes, you know, Chief Ashman's our training chief here, and he's just got a great personality, but, you know, when he asks someone a question about just the simplest, most basic part of, you know, basically pumping, you know, setting the fire commander or, you know, a relief valve or just the basic, and you get that kind of that dog sound thing where people look, because we've moved past that. We touched that in rookie school. We touched that in the first 6 months of the job, but now I want to get on to something better. And unfortunately, we all get caught in those traps. You know, from my standpoint, I sit in an office all day and I do administrative stuff. But I try to get out there every now and, you know, go to a training class. And for me, it's just a chance to get out of the office. But it also, you know, I've been sitting in an office so long, I forget what guys do out there. And so for me, it's always a great review. But I think from top to bottom in an organization, and it gets back to a company officer and that station captain, making sure that you absolutely excel at the very most fundamental basic parts of this job, and then, you know, tackle the complex stuff.
Well, exactly. And like Anthony said, you know, getting water on the fire is, you know, our good friend Andy Fredericks has said that forever. If the quicker you stretch a line, get water to the seat of the fire or attack the fire, the quicker your problems are going to go away, or eventually, you know, just stop, period, depending on how much, you know, fire you've got. My buddy John Salka, when it comes to tank water, even when you see guys pull up, John's always said for years that the water's not on there for ballast. It's not there, you know, to keep the rig from flipping over. It's there for a reason. And I just watched a video where they were so busy on stretch and 5-inch. This thing is just going. And I'm like, somebody just take one person, stretch a line and put some, and even, you know, the comments, we'll get to that in a second, you know, got a little nasty. Unfortunately, it does sometimes. But Jimmy, you've been with Detroit, let's just call it 22 years, like a month short of it. You know, you guys have mastered getting quick water to a fire. And you know, and I'll say this, I've said this before, you know, a lot of young firefighters, you know, they're like, you know, oh, man, I'd love to go to Detroit and, you know, fight fires. And I'm like, well, the guys I know from Detroit really don't have a whole lot of fun, to be honest, fighting vacant structures, the old abandoned ones, because, you know, it is what it is. But you guys have mastered getting quick water on the fire. You guys make rescues, you do it. You know, in the past, sometimes with limited manpower and resources and things. I mean, we know that, but you guys have mastered that. How do you, I mean, you know, aside from that, does it come natural, or let's go back to the academy? What do you tell your academy guys in Detroit when it comes to coming on to, you know, to focus on, just don't think that, you know, we're going to go out there and this is going to come, you know, like this. You're going to have to actually go out and train and do these things.
You know what, Chief, we don't do enough of training like we're talking about. Our guys, we stretch our lines daily, probably working at a fire, but up to that point, like you're saying, with this back to the basics thing, on a daily basis, those lines need to come off the rig so guys get repetition. Repetition is the key, right? Proper preparation prevents poor performance, right? We've heard that for years in the fire service. So I think that's one of the things we can do is have our guys on a daily basis pull those lines off the rig, stretch them, put them back up, put them back on the rig the way you put your stuff on the rig. We do things a little different here too. As everybody knows, I guess you would call it reverse lay. We go from the house to the hydrant. We don't go from the hydrant to the house. So we pull up, we dump our lines. The engineer takes the rig to the hydrant. When he gets to the hydrant, if he's got good water, he lets the hydrant flow. Some guys, when they get comfortable with it, they give us the tank water right away and then finish hooking up to the hydrant. And if they're not comfortable with it, they work a little faster and they get hooked up to that hydrant and get us water. But I think that's the key. The faster, like you said, the faster you get that water on the fire, the better results you're going to have in the end, right?
Well, and like I said, you guys have mastered that, you know. And I watch, you know, my good buddies are up there fanning all the time. I watch the videos, and there's quite a difference. You guys pull up and go to work, you know, house in the middle of a block with nothing else around it that's been vacant for how many years. Versus I've watched your guys pull up when they're telling you there's kids inside, and it's incredible to watch a Detroit firefighter watch a crew go to work, especially when they know, you know what I'm saying? Just it's like this finely tuned, just you know what I'm saying?
Control chaos.
Control chaos. It works out great that way. Kenny, you know, you and I, when we were there for the short time we were together, I know how busy you guys are and how many fires you fight. You guys have a training center for a reason, and you're very highly regarded. I'm not saying that because you're my friend and because I used to work with you. It's just Coeur d'Alene's a very highly regarded fire department when it comes to getting the basics down and that. How did you get to that point?
You know, what we started to do from the beginning is just the culture, and that's the hardest part. And Terry, I completely agree with you. Our guys seem to like the new sexy thing, and it's pretty tough at times to kind of balance, you know, what's new versus what we know is tried and true. And we really pound that into the guys from the very beginning. Our academy, they have to go through the Firefighter 1 completely to even pass probation. And we try to do that. And then our captains, battalion chiefs do such a great job at carrying on that culture to where, you know, we do our best to not let them forget what they need to do. And that's tough. We were talking about this last week. And with all the things we have to do, and you said it great, you know, everybody wants to jump out of the airplane. Everybody wants to come dangling off the side of the tower. But the fact is, what's going to get us hurt and what's going to get us killed. And if our goal as chiefs is to make sure that our guys go home and they drain the Percy system, the retirement system dry, we need to make sure that we, you know, talk the talk and walk the walk and make sure that we don't, you know, veer from that. But I think it's a challenge because, you know, we want our captains to lead, our engineers to pump, our firefighters to put fire out, but at the same time, we have so many demands with high rise and wildland and technical rescue, and you know, it's a pretty difficult task for our captains to stay on task and get that done, Chief. But, you know, something that you started here 17, 18 years ago, and that is be good at what you're good at. Chief, we've heard Tommy Trevino talk about it when the saw wouldn't start, right? Who are you? You know, who do you think you are? Well, you know, I'm the engineer of this truck and this is my saw. And trying to get that thought process through the guys is incredibly important.
Well, and I want to mention before we go, because I want to hit Gary for something here in a second, but one of our very, very good friends, Kenny, we both love and adore him, Chief Jeff Welch. I worked with Jeff in Urbana before he moved out as a chief in Hayden. Jeff's fighting cancer right now, and I'm trying not to get emotional. I love Jeff Welch. And Kenny, one of the things I used to love when I first met Jeff, we were teaching the Essentials program, the hands-on program at U of I at the Fire Service Institute, the oldest fire school in the country. And from that point on, that very first day, anytime I was asked who would I want to teach with, I said I want to teach in Jeff's group, because it was the essentials. It was the newest firefighters going over the basics. It was stretch and hose, wearing SCBA, search, vent, carrying tools, how to use your tools, and so on and so forth. And your thoughts real quick for I got something to ask Gary, but about Jeff, buddy. Just what a great man, first off. But when it comes to the basics and making sure his guys knew how to do their jobs,
he would do impromptu drills at any time. And we've seen that happen. We've taught with them many times before. And you talk about the guy that loves the service. He's that guy. And we're proud of him for the fight he's doing right now, but we're proud of what he's also done for decades for the fire service. And he always kept saying, "I'll see you at the end of the hallway. I'll see you at the end of the hallway." And his thing was, you need to be that guy. You need to be that partner that you can trust behind me when we can't see our hands in front of our face and it's getting bad. We need to trust each other. And the reason and the way you trust each other is you train together, you take it serious together, and his big thing, Chief, and we've done this before, is nobody needs to know your air pack better than you do. The simplest of things, what we make guys put on their backs to breathe and get through the day, and get through those incidents. You need to know that better than anybody. And that's just a very small part of what he's done. But it's part of the group we've been with, and I'm proud of him for doing what he's doing, and I'm proud of him for what he's done.
Well, Jeff Welch, Chief Jeff Welch, you're in our thoughts and prayers, buddy. Keep fighting. We love you, and I mean that with my heart. Love you, you and your family, but keep fighting, buddy. Hey, Gary, when Chief Scott Thompson has been on the show with us a bunch of times, longtime instructor at FDIC, he's a chief over in the Colony, Texas. When he came over to us as our training chief, Gary, we implemented back then, we call the Big Five. Okay, we talked about, and I've said this in class plenty of times. I hope I don't offend any of the state instructors here, but that whole thing. But I can't remember. I've been a chief officer since 1994. I can't remember the last time we've done salvage cover drills, with the exception of the academy and things like that. And Anthony, you'll love this because Gary, the effectiveness of the Big Five we did was, once a quarter, you had to do a hose evolution, a ladder evolution, an SCBA drill, a RIT drill, and a live fire drill, or combine them all at once. What impact has that had? Because you guys do a ton of fire in Lewisville. And again, coming from a truck company, a busy-ass truck company, going as a chief's aide, and then a captain on another busy company, how has that impacted things in Lewisville, Texas?
Well, it makes a huge difference because as we've talked, everybody wants to do the latest and the greatest, and that's fine too, but you got to dance with what got you there. And you mentioned the salvage drill. You know what? I probably haven't done one since I went to rookie school back when we had horses and steamers. So, it's probably something I need to do in my house. I'm fortunate. My guys they're fired up about training. I've got a good demographic down there of a couple of senior guys and some guys been here, through the mid years in their 10s, 12s, whatever. And then I've been fortunate to have a couple of new hires or rookies in the last year. So, they all want to get out and we do that. And it's just when I went down there as their officer, I told them we're not going to do anything to hopefully make us look stupid when we get off the apparatus. And so that's why you do that. And we'll pull the hose. We pull it and pack it back on the engine. We flow the engine. probably 3 or 4 times a month when it's not, we're not on a call, because those younger guys want to promote, they've got to be familiar with it too. So if we're not pulling hose, what we do also is we've got a 150 and a 200-foot roll of rope on an extension cord reel. We'll make a medical call with our ambulance. When they've transported, we're walking back through, and all my guys are good about looking, hey, see where the standpipe was on this, because we're in either multifamily or large commercial down here is what my district is. So the thing I told them, I'm going to be the weak link in this deal, and I'm going to try not to hold you back. But the thing we're not going to do is stretch short. And to not stretch short, you've got to get out and play with that stuff and do, find out where you can go, what you can reach. And I think as a crew, we both surprised each other at times when, we're betting a Coke or a Big Gulp or something on, hey, this is going to reach. No, it's not. And, we find out different things as we're playing in our district and keeping in mind when we're doing this, where we're going to park because we got to save room for the truck, how things are going to go down, the best way to go in, what stairwell we're going to use, if it's this or that. So, like I said, I've been fortunate. I've got a good crew that wants to get out and do those things. And we've had to build, the thing is building the foundation in the guys from, like say, my 18 to 20-year guys that are down there and the newest guy. The kid that comes on has got to have the foundation before he can ever do anything else, hang out of a helicopter or rappel down the building. So, that's why it's got to be done.
Well, and Anthony, just to key off of what Gary just said, obviously you teach on every topic, but let's focus on, let's go to the college or to the academy. As a senior chief as you are, you've been doing this a long time, instructor forever. How do you pound away at the young guys and gals coming in? You know what I'm saying? I mean, I've said it before. You just heard Gary say it. Kenny said it. We've all said it's kind of like, they see some of the fancy stuff. And then you go outside and you go, okay, I want to stretch hose. And I've seen it. They kind of go, really? How do you motivate them? What do you say to them?
Well, sometimes we'll do friendly competitions with that type of thing, but that's after we train them, But unfortunately, one of the things at the academy is you get a little hamstrung with the hours that you can put in. I'm always a big, listen, I'm just a bit, we got to do like something like 24 hours of hazmat, but they get 3 hours of building construction. My feeling is, that's so far off that it's crazy. But, we'll at the academy, we'll do as much hose stretching as we possibly can, as much ground ladder raising as we possibly can. We don't do pump ops. That's another class. But, we will try and make it sort of a game between the squads. Who's going to stretch it the fastest? If there's a mistake, you get a 5-second penalty, that sort of thing. But, we see once they leave us, we see that is something that's not done that well out in the field because they're just not really practicing that. I always tell them, look, you have your monthly drill, your weekly drill. The first 10 minutes should be raising ground ladders or stretching hose. Then do whatever you planned to do. It's just in North Hudson, we cover 5 cities. We have 80,000 people a square mile. We have buildings upon buildings upon buildings. But we will. Our training program is extremely comprehensive. Our ladder companies are raising ladders every single day. Our engine companies are stretching hose probably 3 or 4 times a month. They're getting together, companies working together. A lot of that bread and butter is done there. And then, of course, there's also the perishable skills, which we can't forget. But you're absolutely right that, one high angle rescue you get every 6 months on the cliffs over New York City is minuscule compared to the amount of time you stretch and hose into a building, et cetera. And then the other thing that we would do in North Hudson is we use the buildings for training. I can't stop an aerial in the middle of Bergen Line Avenue, which is, population central, and let's just raise an aerial to the building. But if we're there on alarm activation, nobody knows that we're not raising that ladder, not for training. Yeah, get the probie up here, get them to raise that ladder to the roof. Pull a stretch a dry line to the rear of it, but nobody knows what we're doing. So while we have that street, we'll take every advantage that we possibly can of that stuff. So I think you have to be a little creative. Competitions work really well in those type of things. And, it comes down to a motivated company officer that is motivated by a very well-organized fire department, because poor training is the fault of a fire chief, not necessarily the company officer.
Well, and you just keyed off, so we just keyed off of something. 2 things. One is I love that you mentioned, the competitiveness of the firefighter. I love that. I love that little bit of, you know, why should my fire, like I would tell my guys, why would we not want to stretch a line quicker than them? Not safely, but why would we not want to work to be the best we can so we can pound our chest up and say, you know what, we get there, we get out the door quick, we know how to stretch lines, we know how to throw ladders, so on and so forth. But, and I had right here, I just wrote it down, exactly what you said about a good boss that supports it. You mentioned a good motivated company officer, like I always referred like to Gary, a good motivated, somebody like yourself that, you know, when you were back as a company officer, the energy that the guys, when they, Bill Allen for me in Bedford Park, it's like that you couldn't help but kind of draft off his energy. And he's like, okay, let's go. And here's the guy with 31 years is going, let's go. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. That is so huge. You know, you're right. The chief officer, the chief of the department, if without their support, you know, or without their kind of energy, it kind of goes away.
I have to jump out in a minute, but just one thing. Enthusiasm is contagious, completely contagious. We did just a real quick, we did a knot competition drill in North Hudson, my whole shift, battalion by battalion. We gave them dates for deadlines. We gave them the exact plane they were going to use. And we didn't know if we'd get a lot of buy-in on that. And then what happened was guys would be detailed to other battalions. One company would say, hey, you know, they're practicing those knots. Now it started to take on a life of its own. It was chest thumping, gibber, you know, chipping away. And it became this, we had this like, you know, cheapo little plaque, but these guys were, it took on a life of its own, and the motivation that it created took all of us by surprise, because it just was a really, really good thing for the department and for the shift.
Very cool. And Anthony, and I know you messaged us a little while ago that you had something pop up and you got to leave us. I just want to take this opportunity for you to sign off to thank you for your time, brother. I love you. You're incredible what you do for the fire service. And to our viewers, you got to get his stuff. You got to have him out and come teach your guys. The way he just explained what he did, that's the energy your guys are going to get from in the classroom. So that's what I would do. I'd bring Anthony out in a heartbeat. So Anthony, thank you so much, brother.
Rick, thank you, man. Love you, and be safe out there, brothers. I'm sorry I got to leave a little early. Thanks, bro.
Thanks, Anthony. Hey,
God bless.
Thank you. That was, I'm telling you, Anthony Avillo, retired, recently deputy chief of North Hudson, New Jersey, the regional fire and rescue, that department there, a longtime instructor at FDIC. We're going to lose Anthony here in a second, and he's got to go off and take care of some business. See you, buddy. Jimmy, before I don't want to move off of this topic with Terry, Gary, and Kenny yet. We mentioned Jeff Welch's fight, if you will. You know, let's just talk briefly. As long as we're talking back to the basics, let's talk cancer awareness. And, you know, if someone in Jeff's case, or if you have a firefighter in your department that's going through this, any kind of cancer, whatever it is, what do you have, buddy? What, you know, I know you're so passionate about this. What do you have advice wise and resource wise?
Well, there's a lot of things resource-wise, Chief. As you know, there's a couple different organizations nationally. The one that I'm still involved with, not as heavily as I used to be, but I'm still involved, is the Firefighter Cancer Foundation. We're based out of DeLand, Florida. We do educational components. We do resource management. We can get things to people if they need them. We have a lot of partners who we can pick up the phone and call them nationally, that if somebody's in a hurt and they need to get somewhere, we can move people quickly if we need to. The Firefighter Cancer Support Network is another good group. Those guys do some good work with mentoring and walking people through the process. They're outstanding. I think the biggest thing nationally that we forget is what we do on a daily basis is eventually probably going to kill us. And to extend our life expectancies, there's simple things you can do on a daily basis to make sure that you're able to see your kids have their kids, for lack of a better example, right? Keep your gear clean as best you can. I speak coming from the department I come from. I know I'm beating my head on a wall with this right now, but wash your gloves, wash your hoods. After a fire, clean yourself up, take a shower. Make sure your tank's good every morning. You know, one of the, you know, you get out of the training academy in Detroit, and the first thing they tell you is forget everything they told you in the training academy. We're going to teach you how to do it right. Well, one of the things after 22 years that I remember was from my first day in the training academy is one of our training lieutenants at the time, a man by the name of Tyrone Scott, told us, you know what, you guys, the first thing you do in the morning when you get to work is to make sure that you go home the next day to your family. So when you get to work in the morning, make sure your stuff's good. You know, your gears, your PPE's in the shape it should be in. There's no holes, there's no rips, there's no tears. Make sure your tank's operating properly. Make sure your face piece is in good condition. If you need to get things replaced, get them replaced. Make sure they're clean before you put them on. I'm one of those people who, when I get to work in the morning, after I put my tank together, I pull it out of the harness or the rack and make sure that everything's good. It's clean. There's no asbestos insulation stuck to it. It's clean from the fire the night before. There's nothing sitting on it, things like that. So sorry about that. I muted myself. Steps that we can do on a daily basis to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and make sure that everybody else on your rig is doing the same thing. I mean, you're working with these guys, people I work with. I've been working with them for almost 20 years, the majority of them. So, and we got to start with the young guys. Obviously, if we start preaching to the young guys now, as they grow up in the fire service, they're going to carry that message with them and they're going to live it, not learn it like we're learning it now.
Yeah, so preach it first day in Fire Academy, you know. Hey, Terry, when we talk, we're talking basics and back to the basics, everything, something that always comes to my mind, and I know you, I know Mark, I know Tim, Chief Tittle's the same way. The whole, if we're going to accomplish that, we got to get off the rig ready to do battle. And I know the importance is still there in Lewisville. Gary, you know that. You'll practice it at every shift. Kenny, I know how you are about your guys. Terry, the importance of getting off, there's something as simple as getting off the rig, dressed, ready to do battle comes into play. How hard on the fireground Lewisville?
Well, yeah, and I'm a big believer in dress the part, and it's funny. I've got a daughter that's in theater in high school, and they do dress rehearsals, and the dress rehearsal is the real deal. Just there's nobody sitting in the audience, and they might have gone over something 100 times, but there's something about doing it for real. So I think it's a mindset thing, and if you get off the rig and you're dressed, you got your tools, that's where your head's at, and I think you tend to approach the situation a little bit with a little bit more, I don't know, seriousness, or you are combat ready, I guess. Versus just getting off and it's just kind of we're gonna get off, walk in, see what we got, then come back out, regroup, and so that's something that's taken pretty seriously around here. And you used to say it often, Chief, is that there's no fire till we say there's no fire. So you pull up and somebody says, I was just on the stove and we got it out. It's not that big a deal. We start, reducing or turning companies away and things like that. So not that I don't appreciate the helpful advice that a citizen wants to give you, or the cops want to give you, or whatever. But we'll decide what it is when we decide what it is, and so I think that's a mindset through and through.
Well, and Kenny, just what he said about thinking big. You and I went through this. In Coeur d'Alene, a little bit with dispatch with our neighbors. You remember a time when nobody there ran with each other, and there's a couple departments will pull up with two guys at an engine and wait for the rest of their people or be selective. And you remember what you and I went through just to get people to play nice, to come together. Remember the first time we called two neighboring departments to come fight we had Coeur d'Alene going on. Remember with dispatch, a great dispatch center. She dispatched it as a smoking flower box next to the apartment, and I'm like, "Go ahead, dispatch is a structure fire." She says, "Chief Lasky, but they said it's just a smoking flower." And I'm like, "Yeah, but go ahead." And she said again, I go, "I can see the header in the sky." I go, "Trust me on this." And it was the first time you and I we called for, Kootenai and Hayden at the time, because due to past bosses. Not the guys. The guys, I think, wanted to play together. It was some of the bosses that did. Look at how. Let's talk about. We're talking pretty basic operation, just calling for people. Look at how far we are now with how we get along and how we play versus how we were then.
Well, we sure don't want to relive the sins of the past.
Right.
And they were, and it was personalities, and you know what it was, in my opinion, it was selfishness. It was folks that did not put their folks in their community first. And when different mindsets get in there, it's changed completely. And I can tell you right now that my counterparts at Northern Lakes and Kootenai Fire, you know, we run in their area and they run in ours daily. Now, to the folks with us here today, that's just commonplace. But you'd be surprised that not very long ago, I mean, in our recent memory, Chief, it was not that way. And, you know, when you look at our culture, it's great to know that Chief Riley and Chief Merritt, our cultures are very similar now and trying to do things the same. But I remember vividly jumping off a truck and someone else jumped off a truck. I won't say from where, but you looked at him and said, how come your hands are empty? Well, we don't know what we need yet. What you need to do is go back and get those tools. You need to carry those tools with you. Terry said it best, we're combat ready when we get off the rig. And you know, what's funny is that changed that day, and it's been better ever since. So little tweaks here and there, but for sure, we don't want to relive the sins of the past.
Well, and Terry, you mentioned something earlier, jump right on what just Kenny said about, you know, the 4 rules that we've tried to follow. I know we did it in Coeur d'Alene. I know Jimmy's guys do it. They have to in Detroit, just because of the fire, the work they do, the fire duty they do. But the 4 rules for our viewers that we're talking about was, every time we go out the door, we're going to a fire. I don't care if it's a false alarm to this. I don't care if it's a false activation or a malfunction alarm. The same building, the 3rd time today, when your boots hit the ground, you're ready to do battle. No excuses, none whatsoever. You get off with your gear on, your hood tucked, everything, your pack, your tools, everything, because we have killed firefighters in the United States. All right, I'm just picking on the states here. I know we have a lot of viewers from Canada. We love you, but I'm going to blame our people. We've killed firefighters at BS trouble fire alarms and at nothing showing calls, have burnt them to death because we got off the rig thinking there was nothing showing or nothing, whatever, that kind of thing. Nothing showing is a lazy size up. We could do a whole program on just that. So every time we go out the door, I've said for years, I don't care if you're playing ping pong, if you're painting the walls, whatever colors, I don't care. The moment they drop the tones, your game face comes on and we go out the door and we play right now hard like it's the real thing. Number 2, when we get there, like Terry said, there's no fire unless we say there's no fire. Terry mentioned that before. You know, we're the ones that determine that. Number 3, there's nobody in the building unless we say there's no one in the building. I've been personally to calls with people, everybody's out and this is that. I remember one where the mom was telling us, he's at a 13-year-old, he's at his friend's house. No, he wasn't. He snuck back home. He's in his bed unconscious because he had been drinking. He didn't want to go back to the other place. All right, he was intoxicated. Okay, another one where I actually got yelled at. I'm like, 3rd floor apartment building, fire out the front, and the shift commander tells me to do a search. I'm like, a search? He goes, search the GD building. I'm like, all right, it's 1:30 in the afternoon. Who's going to be in there? I'm a young firefighter, night worker, unconscious. Drag him out. So there's a lot of stories like that to where, you know, I'm not saying we're going to be as aggressive when everybody says they're out. We have everybody accounted for as we are when they say there's a baby inside, but we still have to search. And lastly, it's not out unless we say it's out, and that prevents rekindles, which is just fires that didn't go away. So for somebody just hit me asking Terry on Twitter about the rules or our rules that we follow, and I want to make sure we explain that. Gary, a while back, we had a long, well, golly, probably in 2000, 2001, we had Chief John Salka come to Lewisville. He's been out by Kenny a bunch of times. Jimmy knows John very well. And he did a program for us. And I've said this for years. He kind of in a way, a little bit embarrassed our drivers at the time because he talked about Willie Tracy, his driver in the Bronx, who tested more hydrants in a shift than some guys do in a year or their whole career. And he talked about every time the wheels would stop, he's checked, EMS calls, you come out to the rig and there's a wet spot on the ground because he tested a hydrant. And, a lot of places, Gary, they don't flush the hydrant unless they have even automatic fire alarms, unless there's something showing, they don't flush the hydrant or make sure it's secure. That changed back then. You remember that changed a lot for us on how we did things, just simply by making sure we got water.
Yes, sir. It kind of going back with what Anthony said a while ago. It's the same thing when I drove the truck. You don't always get to do You don't get to play for real. But you know what? I tell a guy, especially when he was newer in the company, and we were starting to take him to the roof and do the things we were going to do, and he was helping me set the truck. Hey, I know there's nothing here, but we're going to roll up here, and it didn't matter if it was in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day. We're going to set this truck. Number one, the more he does it, it's muscle memory. And it's the same thing flushing hydrants. You know, we find bad hydrants you can't get into, you know, or can't get the cap off because it's corroded, or, you know, we've had the city come out and hit them with sledge and to get them open. So all that, if you practice like you're going to play, you're in a much better spot when it comes time for something to happen, or when you make calls. I tell my crew, and especially the kids when they come in, is everything's a routine from even getting your gear out in the morning. You talk about having everything on. That's what I told my guys when I went down there, and I tell new guys today, put it on because that's what they bought it for. And the more you put it on, the more muscle memory you build, and you know you got everything. I put my gear on the apparatus the same way and take it off every day. Certain amount of stuff is in one hand, the rest of it's in the other. It's almost like you've got a subconscious scale there. You know something's not right. If you left something, you know what? You go back and look and you find something that you left. So it's all about muscle memory. Doesn't matter if we're getting dressed and going to the fire. It's about throwing the ladders. It's about the hose. It's about the truck, setting the ladder when you can, whenever you can, because you never know when you may depend on that. So hopefully I answered your question, but I kind of rambled there for a minute.
No. That's there was a great point. It's you know, the muscle memory thing. I actually had that written down as my note in my notes. I talk about Captain John Wright and Flower Mound all the time, his Mayday and muscle memory about everything from, you know, forgetting his thermal imager, you know, hanging from his SCBA to, you know, when he went to activate his pass device 3 times, he kept resetting it instead of activating it because for 16 years he's jumped up in the rig. He's looked it's backwards, and, you know, we don't practice enough with just simple things as pass device drills, radio drills. You know, I ask guys in class, guys all the time, when's the last time you did a radio drill? Remember, we used to do that in the classroom. You're in there right there, where make the guys gear up, you know, masks on, and their radios. You kill off like 60% or better, 80% of the nonsense, the quick keying or the over talking over each other, the busy signals, just by doing a simple radio drill with that. But the muscle memory, you said, the guys that get off the rig, I'll say it because, you know, nobody's going to know who I'm talking about because I've done it a couple different times. I've picked other crews for assignments over other crews because they were ready. I remember one, we had a fatal fire in Lewisville, two kids. And I turned, if you remember, I needed someone to go in and do a quick vent enter search. And I had 3 captains of the crew sitting there. And I looked at Calvin Allison. I looked at Calvin and I said, he goes, Chief, I'm all over it. And he went. One of the other captains came up to me later and said, Chief, I got a bone to pick with you. Why did you pick me? You know, I'm like, now's not the time to talk about it. I said, no, now's not the time. You meet me at shift change with a cup of coffee in my office. You're not going to like what I have to say, but we can also build on that too. And my whole point was, when you are the crew that shows up without your tools, without your gear on, you know, anybody can show up and be all dialed in when there's a structure fire. But what about the ones that snooker you? Gary, I don't know if you were at this fire, or Terry, but the Bank of America building across the street, daytime, 10:30 in the morning, sunny day. Remember, they dispatch a structure fire. I look outside. I go look out the window. There's nothing showing. The BC was on the east end or the west, east end of town, and he says, "Can anybody cover for me, chief wise?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm right here." The ambulance pulls up first, gives it. You know, they said, "We're out. We have 1-story, you know, banking system, you know, facility. Nothing showing on all 4 sides. We'll be investigating." Mark Lee was the captain, chief in Garland, Texas. Now Mark was the captain on a truck. Pull up, said, "Same size up." I pull up, took command. Mark goes inside. There's nothing showing. There's no smoke. There's nothing. There's a couple people walking out, and if you remember, he gets inside and he starts calling for a 2.5, and I'm like, well, what's he talking? I just was like, a 2.5. I go inside. Remember, he's got fire. They got fire rolling over their heads out of their server room. But I've said every time I tell a story, nothing went wrong because they had their tools, they had their gear, they had their packs on. They masked up. The engine came in behind them, stretched the line because the guy's on a stretch line, and the fire went away. You know, it was all because of that. It's the muscle memory, like you said. When you get off the rig, you should have it should be just, you should actually feel awkward or uncomfortable. Like, right, Gary, if you get off the rig without your stuff, you should almost feel kind of like, God, is anybody looking at me? Like, you feel like the world's staring at you. I don't have my stuff with me or my gear on. You should actually feel awkward when you get off the rig without your stuff. You know, Jimmy, how do you, in Detroit, and like I said, I've met some absolutely fascinating and incredible firefighters in the Detroit Fire Department. You know, how do you keep the guys there motivated when it comes to trying to get out with maybe some of their newer guys and stretch hose? You know, instead of waiting for the job, you know, the fire in some of the areas. How do you you know, what's the key there? You've been with 22 years with them. You know, through some busy and some slower times. I won't say slow times, but what do you do, or how do you do that there to keep the guys motivated and engaged?
It's, you know what, it goes back to the thing about what we do on a daily basis are the things that can kill us, right, Chief? And like everybody here said, you need to practice it. You need to make sure you're efficient at it, because when it does hit the fan, you need to be able to perform the top of your game and make sure everything goes right. So we get out, we're going through an ISO thing right now, so some of our training is regimented, which helps a lot because guys got to be on board or there's issues, right, coming down from the administration. But even prior to that, guys take pride in what we do, just like we talked about before. You know, we still don't necessarily race to a fire to be the first ones there, but we get there as fast as we can, because if you're the first one there and you get in that door, you got a little bit of a bragging right with the guys in your battalion, right? Or the battalion next to you. And I think that's where it comes from. It's a little bit of competition every day to make sure that you're doing the best that you can, to make sure that you're not embarrassing the other guys that you're on the rig with. I think that's one of the big things, because you don't want to be the guy that's the slacker on your crew, where I come from at least. And everybody knows we have those guys who you can't shame, but you can get around those guys too, because the rest of the guys on your rig pick up that slack. So I think the big thing is, like you guys talked about earlier, keeping that competitiveness up, making sure that you're repeating these things every day, making sure that everybody knows where the equipment is on the rig in the morning. We're getting to the point where all of our rigs are, all the equipment's in the same spot on every rig, because we've gone through some changes with the bankruptcy that we went through and all that kind of stuff, and we're making a lot of headway right now as far as apparatus and things go. So that helps. That's more that repetitiveness. You know, we don't have 6 different manufacturers' rigs that we're working on a daily basis between the engines, let alone the trucks and the rescue squads. So things like that help. But if I was to say the one key thing is to make sure that your guys know that they're responsible for everybody on that rig and making sure they're going home the next day. That's why you're doing what you're doing on a daily basis.
Well, and you mentioned something. You guys are probably the most photographed, videotaped fire department in the world. I mean,
yeah, there are days where I wish the cameras would go away. That's for sure, Chief.
The buffs. I mean, you know, and God bless him. Our good friend Chief Gordon Nord is up there a lot. But
I saw Gordon last.
He's got so many great friends and doing some great things. You've got. I mean, nowadays everybody's got one of these. They're all filming you. You know, and like I said, none of us. You said earlier, you don't want to make. You don't want to make any comments. Like Anthony said, you want to be the sidewalk, you know, the armchair critic, or, you know, the sidewalk critic. But so you got to keep it to yourself, but you got to use it to learn from. But, you know, everybody's filming. And that's the one thing, some of the critics, I'll just call them the thugs. The thugs. And I just want to throw this out here. I don't know what brotherhood these people belong to, but if Gary Apple, Captain Gary Apple posts a fire he sees or whatever, he filmed or whatever, and then you read the feed. Have you guys read the feed underneath it?
Oh my God.
Oh, it's one thing. It's like, you know, here's one thing. I don't mind a guy says, you know, in light of all what we're doing with cancer awareness, I sure wish I would have seen them put their mask on or whatever. Okay, but still a good knock on a fire. Guys are dropping the F-bomb and calling people names and the attacks. And I'm like, so you're calling yourself a brother or sister, you know, and you know what I'm saying? And I don't know what brotherhood you belong to, but, you know, that's not the place. And, you know, some of them, I'd venture to say, haven't fought a fire in 10 years, okay, if that, you know, it's one thing to be a little bit critical. We're okay. We don't wear our hearts on our shirt sleeves, but the vicious attacks that go on, you know, I just want to get that out there. If you're one of those people who do it, stop it. It's not right. It doesn't represent the fire service, and just act your wage and, you know, do the right thing. If you got a good constructive comment, throw it out there, but stop at the vicious attacks. But like I said, everybody's videotaping, everybody's watching. Kenny, you've got a beautiful training facility there, you know, but long before you had that, you guys were creative and you had resources. What, do you have to have that for the guys to get out and train in the basics, I guess is my question.
No, you really don't. We really didn't have anything. I mean, I think you were there, we built the first saving our own prop, and that was we were so proud of our training tower back then, and that's all we had. But some of the best training that I think our companies do is out in their own districts. And, you know, they talk about pulling lines every day and throwing ladders, and they're doing that around the district now. And I think they gain more from that than they do from, you know, a big training facility anyway. And it's really made a big difference. You know, it's nice to have that ability to do that, of course, but it's even better for them to do, you know, the double duty by doing what they need to do training wise, and then wearing their, you know, their first due. So you can do a lot without a big old building for sure.
Well, exactly. That's what I was saying is, you know, there's nothing more. I used to, when I was just at Trophy Club, another great fire department, I tell the guys, look, you don't have to necessarily go to the training field. You could be coming back from a call, tell your driver, pull over at the park here. They pull over at the park, say, okay, tell your firefighter, stretch across lane to the merry-go-round. I don't care, because there's obstacles that got to go around. You don't have to have it. And I think the more you stretch, if you stretch the hose off your rig, and before you charge, if it stays on the ground all like folded up like this, you probably haven't, you know, you're not stretching it enough when it comes to that. You know, when the drills and topics are always difficult. I'm gonna go back to Gary, long time truck guy, and has seen it. Gary, we've talked about this. You've taught it for a long time as well. It's just the inability to search, or I'll just say the lack of training when it comes to searching buildings. I think we're so far behind with that, that, you know, we don't do it enough with our people. We'll spin the ladders around, we'll run the saws, but one of the most important things you do at a fire is stay oriented in zero visibility. And Gary, I don't think we do enough with that. There's another one. You don't have to have necessarily the training tower to get your guys dialed in, do you?
No, you don't. And it's looking at your looking at the responses or the buildings, the occupancies in your district. But a lot of times, especially during the summer, for some of the captains that I worked for that are now my chief and my boss, it's Texas in August right now. I mean, it's 120 degrees outside, so you don't got to go out and beat them up. So we would do it. You could do it in the station. I mean, you got a little, you know, an advantage there because you probably know where they started you, or you can figure it out pretty quick. But it's the same thing. Take a pack, activate the pass device, and let them come find you. But no, we probably don't do enough of it. I know when we do our drills and we go to the training field, we'll do that. But you know, we can hit anything and probably not hit it enough because we want to be ready when it comes time, and it needs to be second nature instead of thinking about, okay, what did that guy tell me in recruit class or rookie school, you know, 6 months ago or a year ago or 15 years ago, whatever the case may be.
Well, exactly. And then back in rookie school, you know, that's the other thing, you know, newer firefighters will do pretty much anything you tell them to do in the academy. It's when we get out there and you go to work maybe for a company officer who may not be as engaged as, like Anthony was talking about, the need for that. And, you know, all of a sudden you start asking questions. You go, I'll do it when I'm traveling. I said, so when's the last time you stretched hose? When's the last time you did this? And they kind of look at you, go, no, tell me for real. When's the last time? And it was 6 months or 8 months or whatever. And Kenny, you mentioned this. Terry, you talked about earlier. There's so many things we have to train on nowadays. There's so many different areas. It's hard to fit it all in. That's where I kind of went back to the Big Five thing. You know, if I have to pick drills for my guys and gals to train on, I want to make sure they know how to stretch hose, they know how to search, they know how to throw ladders, they know how to start the saw, they know how to use their tools. I used to love, you know, Terry, you and I've talked about, like Dustin Bortsfield was one of my, you know, we'd be at a mutual aid fire and there's some guy up there poking holes in a ceiling. And we're like, Borts, come on in here, right? Borts would come in. He's a captain, but come in, and he'd drop a whole ceiling. or you'd call one of the other guys in that knew it, John, whoever it was, they knew how to take windows out. They knew how to carry use their tools. There's guys come in and, I remember when they wanted to buy the FUBAR tool or whatever it was a great tool, but I'm like, well, there's like 257 no uses for a Halligan. If you give me just 50 of those, we can buy one, but we don't even know about the tools we're supposed to be using. Terry, I know, on your end of things, as an assistant chief, especially handling the budget, we used to talk, John Ashman and I used to go around and take all the extra Halligans, like 5 extra Halligans off the rigs and stuff. And so I appreciate the guys want Halligans, but at the same time, we're giving them the stuff. It's the motivation behind the company officers to get them to get out there and do these when we talk about drilling with the basics. Yeah,
you know what, Chief? I'm fascinated by the airline industry for a number of different reasons. First of all, I think on a day-to-day basis, when you think about commercial air travel, you're very familiar with it. Obviously, that's kind of a second home for you. But the amount of routine that occurs every single day in the aviation business, it's astounding, the safety record that they have. And when I say routine business, it's monotonous, it's boring, it's the same thing over and over. But I'm fascinated by, the crew resource management when they compare like aviation industry to any other profession. But let's take Southwest Airlines, for example. 2 pilots get in a plane in the morning. And I use Southwest because in an 8-hour day, those guys may land and take off 6 to 8 times versus a flight from coast to coast. But those 2 guys get in the same plane. So they set it up, they take off, they land an hour later in Austin. What do? They get a checklist out. They do the same thing over again. It's the same 2 guys. It's the same aircraft, but they go down the checklist and they do everything over again. And they take off from Austin. They go to Houston. And when they land, they take checklist out. They do it all over again. It's monotonous. It's boring. And it saves lives. Absolutely 100% saves lives. It takes the guesswork out of things. It makes things, it is second nature. That is the procedure. They follow the procedure. And it's done thousands of times every single day in an industry that, in all honesty, should be like killing 500 people a day. When you look at how technically overwhelming air travel can be. But in this line of work, and I think we want to skip. Well, the first 3 things are boring. I just want to get to number 4. That's where the fun is. And so I think that's where we have to really slow down and make sure that we, you were mentioning earlier, you got to check that air pack every day. My air pack's in my car and I'm the only one who drives it. But every single day, is it full? Does it work? And guess what? I'm pretty sure it's going to work exactly like it did yesterday when I turned it on and activated the pass alarm. But you do it every day.
Well, and Gary, you've ridden a bunch of times. You rode out in the Bronx with Chief Salka and his crews and the 18th Battalion. You saw it firsthand. And John talks about they don't have a 24 on 48 schedule. They do days and night tours. Now they may do mutuals or sew something together. The same crew can end up working a 24-hour shift. Do the mutuals. The same crew, they do their rig check in the morning. If not one new person came, if they didn't turn a wheel, which would be a shock, but if they didn't turn a wheel, they start all over again in the evening like it never happened. Like
they're doing it on the night tour too, even though they were the guys that were there that morning. And Chief McGrath makes a good point, and I've seen him do it. He checks his pack in the car. Well, okay, he's right. He's the one that drives it. He's pretty sure nobody messed with it. Everything's good. But not a lot of times, but a handful of times in my career, hey, everything's good, everything's great, So you go to check your apparatus and you look at your pack because they've had a fire or some kind of call the night before. Yeah, the pack's there, and a bottle even had air in it, but maybe they didn't hook the regulator back up. So now you've got no way to get the air out of the bottle into the system. So it's loose, it's come off, it didn't get put back on, whatever it is. So your life depends on it, and the time to find out that your life depends on it is not when it does. You need to know ahead of time, and you need to make sure from head to toe that thing's good to go, whatever it is. But, the pack especially.
Exactly. Well, hey, this happens all the time. we're out of time as usual. The hour flies by, and we've been covering some great stuff. I mean, we could spend a whole day doing back to the basics and not touch on everything. We're getting some great comments, I know, on Twitter and on Facebook. What I'd like to do, and Terry and I do this each and every show we host, is ask our guests for their closing comments, if you will. Kenny, I want to hit you first. What advice? You've been very active in your state organization there in Idaho, the Chiefs Association in your area. You're a very progressive fire chief, okay, who gets it. What advice do you give to? You're at the Chiefs conference, Idaho Chiefs conference, and you're having coffee with a couple of chiefs that are newer to that role, and the back to the basics top. What advice do you give them as a chief officer? You heard Anthony, and he's right. It's us. They put the blame on us, the ones that were in 5. What advice do you give that new chief officer about keeping their guys engaged and tuned in with the whole back to the basics thing?
Set a culture of safety, and just absolutely remember what's getting us hurt, what's getting us killed, and try to keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid, but do your best to keep it simple, and make sure that you support what they want to do. And just if you're saying that you're here for the guys, make sure you are. And the way you can prove you're here for the guys is making sure they stay safe and do the right thing. Very cool.
Very cool. Jimmy, take us back. You're teaching. It's academy time in Detroit. You got a whole group of probies sitting in front of you that have watched a lot of videos and a lot of pictures. I've seen a lot of pictures, I'm sure. What do you say about staying dialed in with the basics to that brand new firefighter in Detroit?
I guess the biggest thing that they can do when they come out of the academy here or pretty much anywhere else, I would say, is keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, listen to what the guys are telling you. If you do have a question, ask your question, but listen to what their answer is going to be, because that answer is probably going to save your life someday.
Very cool. Very good. Gary, Captain Apple, all right, you got your crew. You kind of hit it on this a little bit earlier, but you've got your guys right in front of you. Lewisville's a busy fire department, and we've been there where guys have said, well, when you talk about stretching hose or doing something as simple as a search, as a company officer, how do you keep your guys? How do you keep them motivated to stay dialed in with the basics? Same thing.
You explain to them why, and most of them understand it. But number one, we've got to, because we're here to protect the citizens of Lewisville and their properties and the assets that they have, and we need to do it in a timely and efficient manner. And like I said, I've been pretty fortunate. My guys like to do that. They ask about it at times, or they'll see something that I didn't see somewhere. So it was like, well, go back to the engine, get the rope, let's lay it out. Because a lot of the calls we make are during business hours in these hotels and in the warehouses and all that. So you can't always stretch it out. But we have found vacant buildings in our area that are with the highway expansion, we're going to be torn down. And so we'll roll up there, and we've had a couple of actually kind of impromptu multi-company drills. Hey, we're going down here. Why don't you come down with us? Let's play with this a little bit. Got water, got a building, 5 or 6 occupancies before the city boarded it up. I mean, it was kind of our own little playground right around the corner from the station. So, they understand it. And for the most part, I don't have an issue, and I don't think as a department we do, but yeah, sometimes you get somebody that's like, come on, man, really? Well, you just explain to them, and they got to do it anyway. And 99% of the time, they end up having fun, and they actually end up interjecting something into it with their experience. So they have to understand what the name of the game is, I guess, or the object is, because we're here to take care of them, and we don't get better by sitting around, watching YouTube of fishing or something, whatever it is. There's lots of good video out there.
Well, exactly. Like you said, it's about them. You hit it perfectly. It's about those people out there that really, when this all comes down to it, we're supposed to be at our best for them, and we don't get there. Exactly what you just said and what everybody's been talking about. We don't get there by mastering the basics. The military, my son says it all the time. I love him. He loves the fire service, but he's like, Dad, please stop comparing the fire service to the military, because you're not. You think about the repetitiveness there, the muscle memory, what they do when it comes to, it's not like, I don't think we're going to do we're not going to shoot our guns today because we just did it yesterday. you know, they do what they're told, and they work at it, and they work over and over and over again, where, you know, and you ever get into that particular firefighter, whatever, that it becomes second nature. It's muscle memory, like we were talking about earlier. So,
but you know, another thing you talked about, everybody's got a phone now, and to the point you can see 20 cars on the highway on a wreck, and they're just kind of riding by with their phone. You know, they're not watching the car in front of them; they're watching what we're doing. And you know, while we got to protect the citizens, and that is the big reason. The other thing is like I told them when I got this crew, hey, we're not going to be the ones that turn up on YouTube looking like idiots. Okay, we're going to make mistakes. I mean, it's going to happen, but we're going to make a mistake because we were trying to do something good, and not because we didn't pull any hose or we didn't have any idea that was going to be too short. You know, I tell them, if you got any question, pull it all off. If we need some more, we'll go get it, but pull it off if there's any question, and 99% of the time we're going to reach what we got.
And then, again, that's back to that whole competitiveness of we don't want to look bad. Nobody wants to wear the company logo T-shirt says we suck less. You know, nobody wants that. Terry and I and Tim, we used to take the videos from Adam Campetti, and remember, Terry, once in a while we'd bring a BC in the office and go, hey, I want to show you the tape of the fire from last shift, and we show them, and as they're watching it, you could just see them going, okay, I was supposed to notice something, wasn't I? And I'm like, oh, really? Were you? Well, okay, the guy running around without his bunker pants pulled up and no jacket sitting on a 2.5. Yeah, that would probably be the guy we're pointing to right now. So you need to go have a nice little talk and all that stuff. So, but anyway, we got to wrap things up here. Real quick, I want to hit some emails here. So if people want to get a hold of you, Anthony Avillo, Chief Avillo's email is deputy1 at Opton, I hope I'm saying it right, Optonline, OPTONLINE.net. If you want Anthony to come out and teach a program for you, have some questions for him, please reach out to him. Jimmy, what's a good email for you?
Let's use, I have a Gmail. It's ffmox3443@gmail.com.
Very cool. Jimmy, Plieth from the Detroit Fire Department, thank you for joining us, brother, today. And hang on, guys, before we don't hang up yet with us. Kenny Gabriel, if they want to get a hold of you, Chief.
It would be K Gabriel, Gabriel, at cdaid.org.
Thank you, my brother, Kenny. Like I said, hang in there too, buddy. I'm just honored that you're here. Gary, good one for you?
GApple@cityofLewisville.com. And make sure it's LEWIS, and don't send it to Louisville.
I always say that. I'm like, when people say, where are you from? I say, well, I worked in Lewisville, LEWIS. Anyway, Terry, same thing?
T. McGrath@cityofLewisville.com.
All right, perfect. And I'm at 5alarmleadership@gmail.com. If you have any questions or anything, whatever, Terry and I are always looking. Maybe you have an idea for us, for Terry and I, for a show in the future. Shoot that off to us as well. Guys, thank you so much. Hang on, don't hang up with us yet. Stay on when we go off the air here. Did want to mention something, Terry will appreciate this. If you are going to be out there this week paying attention to the eclipse, make sure you're wearing your proper glasses that you need to have when you're staring into the sun like you're not supposed to have. So make sure you've got those on, your total eclipse glasses. Will be good there. Terry remembers those. Hey, we're on Facebook and Twitter, so check us out on any of those. Our next show is August 20th. Catch that with us, and you'll catch some great shows weekly here, 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, and get to interact with some great people like you saw today. We had some great guests. Thank you guys for joining us. Hang in there. Terry and I never end the show without reminding you in closing, please keep the men and women in our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember, never forgetting means never forgetting. Be safe and God bless you. Thank you.